None of that is someone else's problem. And then lastly is this slide. Because I'm a member of this company, I, Robin Chase, have access to cars, 6,500 cars parked in cities across the United States and many university towns. So this more detailed map is, that little red head is my house. And you can see these are the zip car locations that are around my house. Hold on. That amount is a 5-minute walk from my house. So this map is very zoomed in. This, I can walk to about half of these cars in 10 minutes. So I have a huge choice of cars. And when we look at the map of the US, when I do a lot of business traveling, I did one trip that was a ridiculous trip. But I went from San Francisco to Portland to Seattle, Washington, New York, Washington, D.C., and then back to my home in Boston. And there were zip cars in every one of those cities within a block of my hotel. So if I had wanted a car, every single one, in 30 seconds, I could make the reservation and go. And so when we talk about marketing, I say, do that with your own car. You can't. This is a way better way to have access to a car. So marketing is everything, and we see that this has these very, very interesting benefits that people didn't consider and didn't appreciate when they're thinking in their minds, I have to own my own car and use my own car. So the end result from a social and environmental perspective is that there are 25 to 50 people who are car satisfied with one car. For every zip car or shared car there is on the road, we take 7 to 15 cars are sold or not bought. And the quality of life improves for everyone because there is much more parking and the street space is much more free. And this parking paradigm changes. It is true that this company, Zipcar, has changed the zoning and the building in major metro areas across the United States. That they are able to build parking, they're able to build buildings with much less parking. And I would say at Harvard and MIT, which is the very first, which live in Cambridge, the very first town where Zipcar started, we have saved those schools each one parking garage, which is a huge sum of money. They have not had to build because we have condensed their demand for cars. And here, 10 years after I founded this company, there are 350,000 people who are sharing 6,500 cars and 6,500 parking locations. This is instead of, in the US, those people are adults. Instead of 350,000 cars, they're now using 6,500. And we think that in the last year, probably 150,000 fewer cars were on the road. And I was adding this up. This is back of the envelope scratching. That I think that's 0.5% of the US car market was not bought because of this company, which is pretty remarkable. And lastly, we saved 500,000 tons of CO2. And why? How did we save this CO2? This is for me one of the very intriguing aspects of Zipcar, is that when we own a car, as we all know, if you want anything you want to do, your thing is just the cost of gas. So I want some ice cream if I'm sitting at home and I hop in my car and I go get some ice cream. But if I have to pay $10 an hour, now I'm thinking, I want some ice cream, you know what? I'll eat the cookies that are here, or I'll buy ice cream on my way home from school. So what Zipcar has done is that it's brought all the sunk and hidden costs and made car driving fully variable and at full cost by the hour and by the day. And people drive 90% fewer miles when they have to pay all at once. They they walk, or they take a bike, or they go by subway, or they share with friends, or they don't take the trip, because when they have to pay the full amount, it completely changes how they're going to their factors. So this is all I'm going to say about Zipcar, and if you want to have other questions later, you can ask me. And I step back from this company and I say, well, what is it about this company that made it successful from an economic standpoint and from a social perspective, and how can we use that example to find other business models and other opportunities for innovation? So why Zipcar was successful is we had these cars that we all own that are being driven 2 out of 24 hours a day, at most. And there's this, and it's a very, very expensive thing. So there's this huge excess capacity. All these cars sitting out here parked that no one's driving most of the day. And so this concept of sharing excess capacity is the place that I've taken my work. So I want to explore that a little more. And when I think about sharing, it leads me to discuss beds. So what is bed sharing? And I used to joke with my staff that I didn't like them to use the word car sharing because it had a negative connotation. And around marketing is everything, I would say imagine if hotels were called bed sharing. We would have a very different feeling about hotels. So let's talk about beds. So here is a picture of a guest bedroom. Many of us have excess capacity of beds in our house that I now have several extra rooms because I have 2 children that have grown up and gone to university. So when my friends come to visit in Boston, they can stay at my house. And when I go to places where I have friends like Karachi, I can stay in my friends' houses. And this is excess capacity. And if no one ever comes to my house, who cares? You know, my room is there, you can use it or not use it, it doesn't bother me. So I have mapped this out, and I think of this as simple sharing. There's Robin in orange with my stuff, and I'm willing to share my stuff with my friends, my family, my neighbors, people I know and like, and it kind of looks like this one person to my adjacent friends. And if I look at that on a big scale, if you have a lot of people, there's Robin here in Boston with her stuff, and my friends who live in Boston, they're very happy to know me because I share all sorts of things. But my friend who lives here in Karachi, if she wants to borrow my very nice bicycle, she can't borrow it because she's not close, so it doesn't work for her. She might want a bicycle, but she can't borrow mine. So it has pluses and minuses, this idea of us sharing our own excess capacity. And when we think about beds, of course, there's the obvious solution, hotels. So the business world has stepped in and said, we see that this doesn't work for everyone, this sharing of excess capacity on a local level. So we have hotels that are built. When I was thinking of making this talk, it struck me that people thought Zipcar was so incredibly innovative. It's exactly like a hotel, exactly the same thing. The corporate asset is owned by one person, and they're trying to maximize the return on investment. And it's over 7 days a week, how can we fill that hotel at what utilization, at what price? So this is what it looks like. And when I remap it, it's very similar. We have simple sharing. So an institution is going to share or sell its assets. And from a company's perspective, I will share my stuff if you're willing to pay for it, or an institution, if I was a library, you could borrow it. And how does this look from a corporate standpoint? The company has to place its bets. It has to decide where to put these assets. So the company says, I'm going to build my hotels around the world, and some of them, it makes good bets, and so they're well used. And they might place a hotel in the wrong spot, that little green one. There's a green person down there that they didn't build a hotel near me, so there's a need, but there's no one to fill it. So if we think of hotels, sometimes they choose correctly, sometimes they don't choose correctly, but they had to make this big investment and then need to get return on investment. So now I want to talk about where the future is going. And this is, we call this Web 2.0 or sharing 2.0, from one person to many people. So this many-to-many concept. And you know what, I'm going to go back, I'm going to go this other way. Here is something that I found that I completely am infatuated with on this couch surfing perspective. So here's a website called couchsurfing.com. People around the world can put up their excess bedrooms or their free couches, and in 10 years, there are beds to be served in 55,000 cities in 231 countries. So I want you to imagine, is there any company in the world, corporation, that could, in 10 years, produce beds to stay in 55,000 cities? It is just totally unimaginable. And why is it unimaginable? Because they couldn't get the return on investment. When I look at this, I have to say, this makes me think, oh my God, can you imagine how incredible 10 years to have 55,000 cities? And what does this look like in my little mapping way? This is what it looks like. It's a complete mess. You know, there's no predictability. You might be, it's this very messy thing, but it means that the uptake can happen much more quickly because I didn't have to make an investment. This is all excess capacity. If someone stays there, good. If they don't stay there, who cares? And so we were able to get an incredible speed and scale with this 2.0, utilizing technology so that people bring their assets in. So I want to give you another example, another set of parallels. So we'll talk about telephones. Here is a person on an old-fashioned telephone. Let's say it's from the 50s. We used to have one kind of phone, and it would be this black handset because it was owned by the telecommunications companies. They were very interested in the network, and the handset was just something, who cared? And I want to say here, where was their excess capacity? The excess capacity was there was this incredible excess problems and excess creative desire to solve that problem that was completely unmet until telephones were deregulated and they separated the network from the device. When they separated the network from the device, we enabled all the excess creative capacity to give us a huge hundreds of kinds of phones, including cellular, so that now if you happen to have blue sparkly nails and want to have a purple cell phone, you can actually go find that. And this would never have happened before. So they opened up the platform, they got this excess mental capacity, creative capacity out, and now we had this huge plethora. So if we think about what's the next step in this evolution, I'm hoping some of you could be guessing. So the smartphone, and particularly the iPhone, they created a platform, they opened it up, and when I went and did the research for this talk, it is shocking how short a period of time. I had no idea. In just 18 months that phone was out, they had over 100,000 applications. If we think about this, how in heck did that happen? It's not as if the guys, how many engineers could Apple have? Very, very few engineers. By opening it up, tens of thousands of people with all sorts of ideas were able to now bring their own genius ideas and stupid ideas to the realm, and we were able to get the speed and scale that we saw with couch surfing. So again, I say, can you believe it? Just to remind you, 100,000 applications in 18 months, that is remarkable. So I've been looking at this series and thinking, where is that taking us? And it makes me want to make a point. When we think of the 100,000 applications, some are really stupid and useless ones. And here, I have to say, I Googled stupid iPhone applications. Here is from the top of the list. This is an application, free. The game is a game, you hold the button. So you hold the button, and that's the game. How long can you hold the button? It's unimaginable. And since what I want to point out is because the person who invented this game didn't have to come up with the economics that merited the $500 cell phone. You already bought the cell phone for something else, and now this is an application that it doesn't have to have the return on investment. So it completely changes it. Then here's another example, another way of holding buttons that I thought was ingenious, which was, here's using your iPhone, turning it sideways to learn how to play the guitar, learning the chords. So you're holding the buttons, and it's teaching you how to play the guitar by using this as using the phone as the end of the guitar. And I think, that's ingenious. Who would have thought? And I guess that's my point. Who would have thought? There's no one at Apple that would have thought, this reminds me of the end of a guitar. Let's pretend and make an application. They would never have thought of that. And it took 10,000 people doing their diverse lives and their diverse arenas to come up with imagining this. And I look at this and I think, it probably is a good way to learn the guitar. I don't know, but it's a very creative and clever and likely innovative solution. So this idea of openness and creating platforms, I think, is where you get this real lift. So now I'm going to spell it out for you. So how do we move from scarcity into abundance? There's this architecture of abundance, and each of these things I think is important. So I didn't number them, but the first is to identify excess capacity. And I'll be talking a little bit later about ways to think very, very creatively about excess capacity. But so we had excess bed capacity, physical capacity, and excess mental capacity. So that's the start, to think about where there's excess capacity. Then allow others to invest or share in it. So each of these is an example of a platform that let people share in that asset. So Zipcar created a platform that let people share cars. Hotels are a platform that let